A racist shopkeeper humiliates a black customer in front of Inspector, unaware of who Inspector really is. Morgan Lee stepped into the small shop, his heart racing with a mix of excitement and anxiety. Today marked the beginning of his journey as an entrepreneur, and the sleek, modern supply store he was planning to open was just around the corner. He had spent countless hours preparing for this moment, and all he needed were a few essential supplies to bring his vision to life. The bell above the door jingled softly as he entered, announcing his arrival. The shop was cluttered with various items, everything from paintbrushes to canvases, yet it felt inviting. However, the warm ambiance quickly turned chilly as Morgan caught the eye of Casey Brooks, the shopkeeper, who stood behind the counter, his arms folded across his chest. Casey was a middle-aged man with a hard expression etched into his features. His shop had been a fixture in the neighborhood for years, and Morgan had heard whispers about Casey's reputation, how he was known for being unwelcoming to anyone he deemed an outsider. Morgan pushed aside those thoughts as he approached the counter, determined to focus on his goals. "Can I help you?" Casey asked, his tone flat and dismissive as he eyed Morgan up and down, his gaze lingering just a moment too long. Morgan felt a rush of unease, but he forced a polite smile. "Hi, I'm Morgan Lee. I'm looking for some supplies for my new store," Morgan replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "I need some paint, brushes, and canvases." Casey raised an eyebrow, skepticism evident in his expression. "What kind of store are you opening?" he asked, his voice dripping with condescension. "A supply store for artists," Morgan explained, his enthusiasm faltering under Casey's scrutiny. "I want to create a space where local artists can find what they need and share their work." "Right," Casey scoffed, leaning back in his chair. "We'll see how long that lasts. This neighborhood isn't what it used to be, you know." Morgan felt the weight of Casey's words, the unspoken assumptions that hung in the air like a thick fog. He was used to navigating the complexities of being a black entrepreneur in a predominantly white area, but this was different. Casey's hostility felt personal. "Actually, I think there's a lot of potential here," Morgan responded, trying to remain upbeat. "I believe in supporting the community and creating opportunities for artists." The shopkeeper's expression hardened. "You're wasting your time. You don't belong here." The words hit Morgan like a slap to the face. Anger and humiliation surged through him, but he took a deep breath, reminding himself that he had worked too hard to let one man's prejudice derail his dreams. "I'm just looking for supplies," he said, keeping his voice calm. "Can you show me what you have?" Casey rolled his eyes, clearly uninterested in helping. "You'll find the paint in that aisle," he said, gesturing dismissively. "Just don't break anything." Morgan turned away, his heart heavy with the sting of insult. He walked down the aisle, looking at the various products with a mix of determination and frustration. It was hard not to feel defeated in a place that was supposed to be welcoming. As he picked up a few jars of paint, he could feel Casey's eyes on him, a judgmental gaze that scrutinized his every move. "Do you need help with anything?" a voice called out, breaking the tension. Morgan turned to see a young woman with bright purple hair and a friendly smile approaching him. "I'm okay, thanks," Morgan replied, grateful for the distraction. "Just looking for some supplies." "I'm Sydney," the woman introduced herself, extending her hand. "I've been coming here for a while. The shop can be hit or miss, but I know where to find the good stuff." "Morgan," he said, shaking her hand. "I'm new to the area and opening my own supply store nearby." "Nice. It's always great to see new businesses popping up," Sydney said, her enthusiasm contagious. "Just watch out for Casey. He can be a real jerk." Morgan chuckled softly, feeling a sense of camaraderie. "I've already gathered that much." As they chatted, Casey's voice boomed from the counter. "Hey, are you two going to socialize all day? Or are you going to buy something?" Morgan felt a rush of annoyance, but he forced a smile. "I'll take some canvases too," he said to Sydney, who nodded in agreement. "Good choice. I can show you where the better ones are," Sydney said, leading him further down the aisle. As they browsed through the canvases, Morgan felt a sense of relief washing over him. Sydney's friendly demeanor reminded him that there were still good people in the world, despite Casey's negativity. They exchanged ideas about art, and for a moment the weight of the shopkeeper's hostility faded away. However, as they reached the checkout counter, the tension returned. Casey was watching them with a narrowed gaze, his expression a mixture of disdain and contempt. "Are you ready to pay?" he asked, his tone sharp. Morgan felt a knot tighten in his stomach. "Yes, I have everything here," he replied, placing the items on the counter. Casey began ringing up the items, and as he did, he muttered under his breath, "I hope you know what you're getting into. This neighborhood doesn't need more people like you." Morgan's heart raced. He wanted to ignore the comment, to focus on the transaction and get out of there. But anger bubbled up inside him. "What do you mean by that?" he asked, his voice steady but firm. Casey's eyes glinted with malice. "You know exactly what I mean. You don't belong here, and you won't last long." The words stung, and Morgan felt his face flush with humiliation. In that moment, he had a choice to make. He could either let Casey's racism slide, allowing the shopkeeper to continue his tirade, or he could stand up for himself and confront the injustice head-on. Taking a deep breath, Morgan made his decision. "You have no idea what I'm capable of," he said, his voice rising slightly. "Just because you have your prejudices doesn't mean I won't succeed. I'm here to build something positive, and your attitude won't stop me." Casey's expression shifted, surprise momentarily eclipsing his disdain. "You think you can just waltz in here and change things? You're delusional." Before Morgan could respond, the bell above the door jingled again, and in walked Riley Sanders, the city inspector. Riley was a tall figure with an air of authority, and Morgan felt a flicker of hope at the sight of him. Perhaps this was the moment when things would shift. "Is everything all right in here?" Riley asked, his brow furrowed as he surveyed the scene. Morgan seized the opportunity. "Not really. This shopkeeper has been treating me as if I'm a criminal, simply because of my skin color." Casey's face paled, and he quickly attempted to cover up his behavior. "Oh, it's just a misunderstanding, Riley. This guy—" "Enough," Riley said, cutting Casey off with a steely gaze. "I've heard enough." He turned to Morgan, concern etched on his face. "I'm sorry you had to go through that. This kind of behavior is unacceptable." Morgan felt a rush of relief at Riley's support. Maybe this was the turning point he had been hoping for. As Casey's facade began to crumble, Morgan realized that standing up for himself wasn't just about him, it was about the community as a whole. "Thank you," Morgan said, feeling empowered. "I'm trying to create something positive here, but people like Casey make it difficult." Riley nodded, his expression resolute. "I'll be looking into this matter further. Everyone deserves to be treated with respect, regardless of who they are." As Casey's face reddened with anger and humiliation, Morgan felt a sense of victory. He had not only stood up for himself, but also brought attention to the issue at hand. The tide was turning, and for the first time, he felt hopeful about the future. Morgan stood tall, feeling a mix of adrenaline and hope coursing through him as Riley Sanders, the city inspector, took charge of the situation. The oppressive atmosphere in the shop began to lift, replaced by a sense of purpose. He could feel the eyes of the other customers on him, sensing the shift in energy as Riley's presence commanded respect. Casey Brooks, on the other hand, was visibly rattled. The shopkeeper's bravado crumbled under Riley's gaze, and Morgan could see the wheels turning in Casey's mind as he scrambled to regain control of the narrative. "This is just a misunderstanding," Casey insisted, his voice shaky. "I'm a longtime business owner here. I have a reputation to uphold." Riley crossed his arms, unimpressed. "A reputation built on intimidation and discrimination? That's not the kind of reputation this community needs." Morgan felt a surge of satisfaction at Riley's words. This was the support he had longed for, a validation of the struggles he faced in this environment. He couldn't help but smile slightly, allowing the weight of humiliation to dissipate as Casey's defensiveness became apparent. "Look, I'm just trying to run a business," Casey continued, desperation creeping into his tone. "I can't have people causing trouble in my store. You know how this neighborhood is changing." "Changing for the better, Casey," Riley shot back. "The community is diversifying, and with that comes new opportunities. You can either adapt or get left behind. Your choice." Morgan watched as Casey's face darkened. He could see the anger simmering just below the surface, and he knew that this confrontation was far from over. The shopkeeper's arrogance had been challenged, and now he felt cornered. "Why don't you just leave?" Casey barked at Morgan, his voice laced with venom. "You don't belong here, and you never will." Morgan felt a flicker of fear, but it was quickly overshadowed by a resolve. a resolve he hadn't known he possessed. "I'm not going anywhere," he replied, his voice steady. "I'm here to stay, and I'll continue building my business. Your racism won't intimidate me." As the tension in the room escalated, other customers began to murmur among themselves, exchanging glances and whispering. Morgan caught snippets of conversations, and it was clear that they were beginning to side with him. "Who does he think he is?" one customer said, shaking his head. "You can't treat people like that." "Right? It's 2024, not the dark ages," another woman chimed in, her voice rising. "We need to support our community, not tear it apart." Casey's demeanor shifted as he realized the tide was turning against him. He attempted to regain control, but his words came out stammered and weak. "This is my store. I have the right to refuse service to anyone I choose." "That's not how this works, Casey," Riley interjected, his tone firm. "Refusing service based on race or ethnicity is illegal, and I'll be reporting this incident. You can't treat people like this and expect to get away with it." Morgan felt a swell of gratitude toward Riley. It was one thing to confront Casey himself, but having an official presence validate his experience made all the difference. The inspector's authority added weight to Morgan's words, reinforcing the message that discrimination would not be tolerated. "Maybe you should think about your business practices," Riley continued, his voice unwavering. "If you want to survive in this community, you need to learn to treat everyone with respect. You're not just selling products, you're part of this community." Casey's face flushed with anger and embarrassment, and for a moment he seemed at a loss for words. "You're just a city inspector. You don't know what it's like to run a business," he finally spat, attempting to deflect Riley's scrutiny. "No, but I know what it's like to be treated with respect," Riley shot back. "And I'm not going to let you bully anyone else in this neighborhood." Morgan felt empowered by the exchange. The support from Riley and the murmurs of agreement from the other customers bolstered his confidence. He had come to this shop seeking supplies, but he was leaving with something far more valuable, a sense of self-worth and community backing. "Casey," Morgan said, his voice calm yet resolute, "you may have built this business, but you don't own this community. People are tired of your disrespect and your outdated views. We're here to uplift one another, not tear each other down." Casey's expression twisted into a sneer, but he remained silent, clearly seething. The conversations among the customers grew louder, and the atmosphere shifted from one of hostility to solidarity. Riley stepped closer to Morgan, his presence a reassuring anchor. "I'll be filing a report, and we'll make sure that this kind of behavior is addressed," he said quietly. "You're not alone in this. We'll make sure your voice is heard." Feeling the weight of the moment, Morgan nodded. "Thank you, Riley. It means a lot to have your support." As the confrontation continued, Casey finally snapped. "Get out, all of you. I don't need this kind of business," he shouted, waving his arms in frustration. This only fueled the customer's resolve. "We're not going anywhere," one woman said defiantly. "You need to learn how to treat people right." Morgan took a step back, feeling a mixture of relief and disbelief. This was turning into something he had never expected. The shopkeeper's aggression had sparked a small uprising among the customers, and for the first time he felt like he wasn't fighting this battle alone. "Let's go, Morgan," Riley said, motioning for him to follow. "I think it's time we leave this place behind. Casey needs to understand the consequences of his actions." As they walked out, Morgan glanced back at Casey, whose face was a mask of rage and humiliation. The shopkeeper's anger was palpable, but it only served to strengthen Morgan's resolve. He had taken a stand today, and he was not going to let anyone belittle his dreams or his worth. Outside, the crisp air embraced Morgan like a refreshing balm. He took a deep breath, feeling lighter than he had in weeks. The incident had given him more than just a confrontation. It had provided him with a reaffirmation of his strength and the support of the community he hoped to serve. "Thank you for standing up for me," Morgan said to Riley, feeling a sense of camaraderie. "I really appreciate it." Riley smiled. "You deserve to be treated with respect, and I'm glad I could help. This community needs people like you who are willing to stand up and make a difference." As they walked down the street, Morgan couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. He was determined to build his business and create a space where everyone felt welcome, regardless of their background. He envisioned a community center for artists, a place where creativity thrived and diversity was celebrated. As they parted ways, Morgan felt a renewed sense of purpose. He had faced humiliation and discrimination, but he had also found allies and supporters. The road ahead would be challenging, but he was ready to embrace it, fueled by the knowledge that change was possible. The following days were a whirlwind of emotions for Morgan Lee. He felt a surge of empowerment after the confrontation at Casey's shop, but with that empowerment came the weight of reality. His determination to succeed was stronger than ever, but the shadows of doubt loomed large. Would the community truly support him? Would Casey retaliate in some way, or was this just the beginning of a larger battle against the prejudice he faced? Morgan poured himself into preparations for his new store. He spent late nights organizing supplies, designing the layout of the space, and brainstorming ways to attract customers. He envisioned a vibrant hub for local artists, workshops, exhibitions, and community events that would foster creativity and collaboration. But as he worked, he couldn't shake the feeling that Casey was still lurking, waiting for an opportunity to sabotage his efforts. On a particularly busy Saturday, Morgan set up a booth at a local art fair, eager to engage with the community and showcase his vision. The sun poured down, and the atmosphere was electric with creativity. Artists displayed their work, and musicians played lively tunes. Morgan had brought samples of the supplies he offered, hoping to connect with other artists and encourage them to visit his store once it opened. As he arranged his booth, he spotted Riley Sanders walking through the fair, chatting amiably with other vendors. Morgan felt a surge of gratitude. Riley had become an unexpected ally, his support a beacon of hope in a challenging landscape. He waved and Riley made his way over, a broad smile on his face. "Looks great, Morgan," Riley said, glancing around at the vibrant colors and artistic displays. "I love what you've done here." "Thanks. I'm just trying to make connections," Morgan replied, his enthusiasm bubbling. "I want to create a space where artists feel welcomed and supported." "You're doing exactly that," Riley said, his voice encouraging. "The community needs more people like you who are willing to stand up and create something meaningful." As they chatted, Morgan noticed a familiar figure approaching from the corner of his eye. It was Casey Brooks, his presence unmistakable as he walked through the fair with an air of arrogance. Morgan's heart sank. He had hoped that after the confrontation, Casey would retreat and reconsider his approach. But here he was, striding through the crowd with his usual bravado. Casey's eyes locked onto Morgan, and a smug smile spread across his face. "Well, well, if it isn't the neighborhood's newest entrepreneur," he sneered, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "How's the business going? Still dreaming?" Riley stepped forward, his posture protective. "I think it's time for you to leave, Casey. Nobody wants to hear your negative remarks here." "Why, just because he's some wannabe artist?" Casey shot back, his voice loud enough to draw attention. "No one's going to take him seriously. He's just wasting his time." Morgan felt a rush of anger, but he refused to let Casey's words affect him. He stood tall, determined to show that he wouldn't be intimidated. "I'm here to build something positive, Casey. You can keep your negativity to yourself." Casey laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the fair. "Positive? You think you can change anything around here? This is my turf, and I won't let some kid come in and ruin it." "Your turf?" Morgan challenged, stepping closer. "This community belongs to everyone. It's not just yours to control. People are ready for change, and I'm going to be part of that change." The atmosphere around them shifted. Other vendors and attendees had begun to take notice, their eyes turning toward the escalating confrontation. Morgan could feel the tension in the air as people leaned in, eager to see how this would unfold. Casey, sensing the crowd's growing interest, attempted to regain control. "You think you're some kind of hero, don't you? But you'll never make it. You're not what this neighborhood needs." "Maybe you're the one who doesn't understand what this neighborhood needs," Morgan shot back, his voice rising with conviction. "People are tired of being judged by their skin color or their dreams. You should be ashamed of yourself." Riley stepped in again, his presence grounding. "Casey, you're crossing a line. This is a community fair, and your behavior is unacceptable. If you can't treat others with respect, you're not welcome here." Morgan felt a swell of support from those around him. He could see nods of agreement, murmurs of encouragement. The fear he had felt earlier began to dissipate, replaced by the strength of collective resolve. Casey's face flushed with embarrassment and anger, but he was trapped. With the crowd now looking at him with disdain, He had no choice but to retreat. "You'll regret this, Morgan," he spat, his voice low and threatening as he turned to leave. "I'll make sure of it." As Casey walked away, the crowd erupted into whispers, some expressing their support for Morgan, while others exchanged disapproving glances about Casey's behavior. Morgan felt a rush of adrenaline, knowing he had stood his ground yet again. He turned to Riley, who was watching him with a mix of admiration and pride. "You handled that well," Riley said, a grin breaking across his face. "You've got a real fire in you." "Thanks, but I didn't want to escalate things. I just want to be part of this community, not create more division," Morgan replied, catching his breath. "You're doing just that. By standing up to Casey, you're showing others that they can do the same. It's important," Riley emphasized. With the confrontation behind them, Morgan refocused on the art fair. He spent the rest of the day engaging with artists, sharing his vision for the future, and building connections that would serve him well when he opened his store. The conversations flowed, and Morgan felt a sense of belonging that he hadn't experienced before. As the fair began to wind down, Morgan gathered his supplies, feeling a renewed sense of purpose and determination. He was ready to take on whatever challenges lay ahead, but as he packed up, he couldn't shake the feeling that Casey wouldn't simply let this go. The shopkeeper was stubborn, and Morgan knew he would likely try to undermine him again. The thought lingered in the back of his mind as he loaded his things into his car. Days turned into weeks, and Morgan was busy preparing for the grand opening of his store. He poured every ounce of energy into making it a space where creativity and community thrived. He reached out to local artists to display their work, arranged workshops, and set up events that would draw people in. However, just as he felt he was gaining momentum, an unexpected email landed in his inbox. It was from a local news outlet requesting an interview about his new business. Excited yet nervous, Morgan quickly replied, agreeing to the interview. This was an opportunity to share his vision with a broader audience. On the day of the interview, Morgan felt a mix of anticipation and anxiety. He dressed carefully, wanting to present himself as a professional. As he arrived at the designated location, he was greeted by a friendly journalist named Avery Kim, who immediately put him at ease. "Thanks for meeting with me, Morgan. I've heard so much about you and your new store. It's exciting to see someone so passionate about the community," Avery said, her enthusiasm infectious. Morgan smiled, grateful for the support. "Thank you. I really believe in creating a space for artists to thrive. It's been a challenging journey, but I'm excited about what's to come." As they settled into the interview, Morgan shared his vision, his experiences, and the challenges he faced. He spoke candidly about the confrontation with Casey, emphasizing the importance of standing up against prejudice and creating an inclusive environment. Avery listened intently, nodding along as he spoke. "Your story is powerful, Morgan. I think it will resonate with many people in the community. How do you see your store impacting the neighborhood?" Morgan took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. "I want my store to be a place where everyone feels welcomed, where artists can connect and collaborate, and where creativity is celebrated. We need to uplift one another and create a community that supports diversity." As the interview wrapped up, Avery smiled brightly. "This is going to make a great piece. Your passion is inspiring, and I can't wait to share your story with the community." As Morgan left the interview, he felt a renewed sense of hope. Maybe this was the turning point he needed to truly establish himself and his business. But deep down, he knew that Casey wouldn't remain silent for long. The shopkeeper was still lurking in the shadows, and Morgan couldn't shake the anxiety that came with that reality. The grand opening of Morgan's supply store arrived with a buzz of excitement. The morning sun illuminated the storefront, and Morgan stood outside, taking a moment to appreciate the culmination of his hard work. Banners adorned the windows, proclaiming "Grand Opening" in bold letters, and colorful artwork from local artists adorned the walls, transforming the space into a vibrant hub of creativity. As the clock struck 10, the doors swung open, welcoming a steady stream of customers. Morgan greeted each visitor with a warm smile, eager to share his vision and connect with the community he had fought so hard to be part of. The atmosphere was electric, filled with laughter, chatter, and the sound of artists discussing their work. For the first time, Morgan felt a deep sense of belonging. However, in the back of his mind, he couldn't shake the feeling of unease. He had expected Casey Brooks to retaliate in some way, and as the morning progressed, he found himself glancing nervously at the door, half expecting the shopkeeper to burst in with hostility. "Hey, Morgan, this place is amazing," a voice called out. Morgan turned to see Sydney approaching, her bright hair catching the sunlight. "I'm so proud of you for making this happen." "Thanks, Sydney. I really appreciate your support," Morgan replied, feeling a warmth spread through him. "It means a lot to have people like you in my corner." As they chatted, Morgan noticed a group of familiar faces, artists he had met at the fair, gathering near the canvas section, discussing supplies and upcoming projects. The sense of community enveloped him, and he felt a surge of optimism. But just as he was about to head over to join them, the bell above the door jingled, and his heart sank. Casey Brooks. Casey Brooks stood in the entrance, his presence a stark contrast to the joyful atmosphere. The shopkeeper's expression was a mask of contempt, and Morgan could feel the tension in the air thickening. "Look what the cat dragged in," Casey sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. "I didn't think you'd actually open this dump." The chatter around them faded, and all eyes turned to Morgan and Casey. Morgan felt a knot tighten in his stomach, but he refused to let fear dictate his response. He squared his shoulders, determined to stand his ground. "This is my store, Casey," Morgan replied, keeping his voice steady. "I'm proud of what I've built here, and I'm not going to let you intimidate me." Casey stepped further inside, crossing his arms over his chest. "You think you're going to change anything around here? This neighborhood doesn't need another wannabe artist trying to make a quick buck." Morgan felt a surge of anger and frustration. "This isn't just about making money, Casey. It's about creating a space for artists to thrive and connect. You wouldn't understand that because you've been too busy clinging to outdated views." As the tension crackled in the air, Morgan noticed Riley Sanders moving through the crowd, his presence a reassuring reminder that he had allies. Riley approached, sensing the escalating confrontation. "Casey, I think it's time for you to leave," Riley said firmly, his tone brokering no argument. "This is a celebration, and your negativity isn't welcome here." Casey's face contorted with rage, but he knew he was outnumbered. "You think you can just push me around, Riley? This is my neighborhood, too." Riley stepped closer, his voice low and steady. "No one is trying to push you around, Casey, but if you continue to harass Morgan and his customers, you'll find yourself in a lot of trouble." Morgan felt a rush of gratitude toward Riley. The inspector's unwavering support gave him the strength to hold his ground. "You may think you own this neighborhood, Casey, but people are ready for change. You can either adapt or get left behind." The crowd began to murmur in agreement, and Morgan sensed a shift in the atmosphere. Casey's bravado faltered, and for a brief moment, uncertainty flickered in his eyes. But he quickly masked it with anger, glaring at Morgan. "Enjoy your little party while you can. I'll make sure everyone knows what a joke this place is." Casey spat before turning on his heel and storming out. As the door swung shut behind him, the tension in the room dissipated, replaced by a wave of relief. Laughter and conversation resumed, but Morgan felt a twinge of apprehension. He knew that Casey wouldn't simply give up, he would retaliate. "Don't let him get to you," Riley said, placing a reassuring hand on Morgan's shoulder. "You've got the community behind you now. This is a new chapter." Morgan nodded, grateful for Riley's support. "I just wish he would understand that his way of thinking is outdated. We're all trying to create something beautiful here." The day continued with laughter, creativity, and a sense of camaraderie that filled the shop. Morgan felt a renewed sense of purpose as customers came and went, sharing stories and ideas, and connecting over their love for art. But as the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the shop, Morgan's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out to check the message, his heart sinking as he read the notification. It was an article from a local news outlet, and the headline made his stomach drop. "Local shopkeeper claims new artist store is a threat to the community." The article featured quotes from Casey, who painted Morgan as an outsider trying to take over the neighborhood, claiming that his store was nothing more than a gimmick. Morgan's hands trembled as he read through the piece. Casey had spun the narrative to play the victim, portraying himself as a defender of the community against Morgan's so-called invasion. It was a deliberate attempt to undermine everything Morgan had worked for, and he felt a wave of anger wash over him. "Everything okay?" Riley asked. noticing Morgan's change in demeanor. "No," Morgan said, his voice tight with frustration. "Casey just published an article attacking me and my store. He's trying to turn the community against me." Riley frowned, reading the headline over Morgan's shoulder. "This is outrageous. He's trying to manipulate the narrative to make himself look good." Morgan ran a hand through his hair, feeling overwhelmed. "I can't believe he would go this far. I thought we were making progress." "We are making progress," Riley reassured him. "But this is a tactic he's using to intimidate you. We can't let him get away with it." Morgan took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts. "What do? I can't just let him paint me as some kind of villain. I want to show the community who I really am and what I'm trying to achieve." "You need to fight back with your own narrative," Riley suggested, his tone serious. "Use the article to your advantage. Share your side of the story and highlight the positive impact your store will have on the community." Morgan nodded, determination flooding through him. "You're right. I need to show the community that I'm here to support them, not tear them apart." As the day came to a close, Morgan began drafting a response to the article. He poured his heart into the message, sharing his vision for the store, the artists he wanted to support, and the community he cherished. He included personal anecdotes and testimonials from the customers who had visited that day, demonstrating the positive impact his store was already having. With every word he typed, Morgan felt a sense of empowerment. He was no longer just reacting to Casey's attacks. He was taking control of his narrative. This was his chance to showcase the truth and highlight the importance of unity in the face of adversity. Once he finished, he pressed send and sat back, feeling a mixture of relief and anticipation. He had put his heart into this response, and now it was out in the world. The next morning brought a flurry of notifications. Morgan's response had gone viral, shared across social media, and people were rallying behind him. Comments poured in from supporters, expressing their solidarity and condemning Casey's divisive tactics. Morgan's heart raced as he read through the messages, each one a reminder that he was not alone in this fight. The community was coming together, and he felt a renewed sense of hope. But as he scrolled, he noticed a particularly harsh comment that caught his eye. It was from Casey, who had responded to Morgan's article with venomous words, vowing to protect the neighborhood from what he referred to as infiltration. Morgan's stomach twisted. He knew Casey wouldn't back down easily, and that this battle was only just beginning. But he also knew that he had the support of the community, and together they could rise against the negativity. As the days unfolded, Morgan felt the weight of the ongoing battle against Casey Brooks pressing heavily on his shoulders. The initial excitement of his grand opening had been marred by the hostility brewing in the community, and it was becoming clear that Casey's influence ran deeper than he had anticipated. Morgan had never imagined that the situation with Casey would escalate so quickly, but he was determined not to let fear deter him. The support from the community had been overwhelming. Customers who had visited his store rallied behind him, sharing their positive experiences on social media and countering Casey's claims. Local artists reached out, offering to collaborate on workshops and events that would not only showcase their work, but also emphasize unity and diversity. Morgan felt a renewed sense of purpose as he began organizing these events, channeling his energy into building a vibrant community space. However, Casey's retaliation was relentless. He had taken to social media to launch a smear campaign, sharing distorted narratives about Morgan's intentions and calling for a boycott of his store. The comments were filled with vitriol, and Morgan could feel the tension brewing. Every ding of his phone brought a new wave of anxiety. One evening, as Morgan sat at his kitchen table, he stared at his laptop screen, scrolling through the latest comments on Casey's posts. The negativity was suffocating, and he felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He needed a plan, something that would turn the tide and showcase the true spirit of his store. Just then, a notification popped up. It was a message from Riley. "Let's meet. I have an idea that could help." Morgan felt a surge of hope. He quickly replied, agreeing to meet at a local cafe. As he arrived, he spotted Riley sitting at a corner table, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Hey, Morgan, I've been thinking about how to turn this situation around," Riley said, his eyes bright with determination. "We need to show the community what you're really about, and I have an idea that might just do the trick." Morgan leaned in, eager to hear what Riley had in mind. "I'm all ears. Anything to counter Casey's nonsense." Riley took a deep breath, clearly excited. What if you organized a community art festival? You could invite local artists to showcase their work and host workshops. Make it a celebration of creativity and diversity. A direct response to Casey's negativity. Morgan's eyes widened at the suggestion. That's brilliant. It would not only highlight the local talent, but also strengthen community ties. We could show Casey that we're not afraid, and that we're here to uplift each other. Exactly, Riley replied, his enthusiasm infectious. We can promote it heavily on social media, and I can help you reach out to local news outlets to cover the event. This could be the opportunity you need to shift the narrative. Morgan felt a wave of excitement wash over him. Let's do it. I'll reach out to the artists I've connected with already and see who wants to participate. We can make this a celebration of what our community truly represents. They spent the next hour brainstorming ideas for the festival. Morgan envisioned an array of activities: live painting demonstrations, interactive workshops, and even a local music showcase. They would create a space where everyone felt welcome, where art could flourish, and where Casey's negativity would be drowned out by the vibrant energy of the community. As they finalized the details, Morgan couldn't help but feel a sense of determination coursing through him. This festival could be a turning point, a chance to reclaim his narrative and demonstrate the positive impact of his store. With Riley's support, he felt like he could take on anything. The following days were a whirlwind of activity. Morgan reached out to local artists, sharing the vision for the festival and inviting them to participate. To his delight, many were enthusiastic about the idea and eager to showcase their work. He also secured a local band to perform, ensuring that the festival would be a lively and engaging event. As the festival date approached, Morgan poured every ounce of energy into preparations. He designed flyers, set up social media pages, and reached out to local businesses for sponsorships. The community began to rally around the event, and Morgan felt a sense of camaraderie that he had longed for since opening his store. However, just when things seemed to be falling into place, the storm clouds rolled in. A few days before the festival, Morgan received a message from Avery Kim, the journalist who had interviewed him earlier. Hey Morgan, I just wanted to give you a heads up. I heard that Casey is planning to protest the festival. He's trying to rally people to show up and disrupt the event, Avery wrote. Morgan felt his stomach drop. Of course he is, he muttered under his breath, frustration coursing through him. What a coward. Listen, don't let him intimidate you. This festival is about the community, and you can't let Casey's negativity overshadow that, Avery encouraged. You're right, Morgan replied, determination igniting within him. We won't let him ruin this. We'll go ahead and make it a success, regardless of what he tries to do. The day of the festival arrived, and Morgan stood outside his store, looking at the colorful decorations and the bustling crowd that had gathered. The air was filled with laughter, music, and the scent of food from local vendors. He couldn't believe how many people had shown up to support the event. As the festival kicked off, Morgan felt a rush of excitement. People wandered through the booths, admiring the artwork, participating in workshops, and engaging in conversations. The sense of community was palpable, and he felt a warmth spreading through him. But as the festival progressed, Morgan's apprehension grew. He kept glancing toward the entrance, half expecting Casey to show up with his supporters. Just as he was beginning to feel relaxed, he spotted a group of people approaching. Casey among them, a smug expression planted firmly on his face. Looks like the circus is in town, Casey called out, his voice loud enough to draw attention. This is what you call art? Pathetic. The crowd turned and Morgan felt a surge of anger. He couldn't let Casey's antics ruin the joyous atmosphere. This is a celebration of creativity, Casey. You're not welcome here, he shouted back, his voice firm. Casey pushed through the crowd, flanked by a few of his supporters. You think you can just invade this neighborhood and act like you belong? You're nothing but a fraud. Morgan's heart raced. He could feel the tension rising as Casey's supporters began to echo his sentiments, attempting to drown out the positivity that had filled the festival. Everyone, please, Morgan called out, raising his hands to quiet the crowd. This festival is about unity and creativity. We're here to celebrate our community, not to tear each other down. Casey laughed, a harsh sound that rang through the air. Unity? You're the one dividing us. People are sick of your nonsense. Riley stepped forward, his expression stern. Casey, you're out of line. This is a peaceful event, and we won't let your negativity spoil it. Morgan felt a wave of support from the crowd as people began to rally behind him. We're here for art, for expression, and for each other, someone shouted. The atmosphere shifted as the crowd began to chant, Unity, community. Their voices drowned out Casey's insults, and Morgan felt a rush of pride. He realized that the community was standing together against the negativity, and he wasn't alone in this fight. Fine, enjoy your little party, Casey spat, his face twisted in anger. But don't say I didn't warn you. With that, he turned and stormed away, his supporters trailing behind him. As the tension dissipated, Morgan felt a sense of relief wash over him. The crowd erupted into applause, and he could see the smiles on people's faces as they returned to the festivities. It was a testament to the power of community, and he felt grateful to be a part of it. The festival continued, filled with joy, laughter, and creativity. Morgan spent the day connecting with artists, sharing stories, and celebrating the spirit of the community that had embraced him. He realized that no matter what challenges lay ahead, he had found his place. But deep down, he knew that Casey's actions were far from over. The confrontation had only fueled the fire, and it was clear that this battle would require more than just community support. It would take resilience, determination, and the unwavering belief that together they could overcome any obstacle. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the festival, Morgan stood at the center of the crowd, feeling a profound sense of belonging. He had faced adversity, but he was ready to fight for his dreams and the community he cherished. As the festival wound down, Morgan Lee stood amidst the remnants of the joyous celebration, a mixture of relief and exhilaration coursing through him. The community had come together in a powerful show of support, and in the face of adversity, he had found not just allies but friends who believed in his vision. He watched as families packed up their things, artists exchanged contact information, and laughter echoed through the air. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the crowd. Morgan felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude wash over him. This was more than just a successful event. It was a statement. They had shown Casey Brooks that the community was united, and they would not be intimidated by his hostility. Riley approached, a broad smile on his face. You did it, Morgan. That was incredible. The turnout was amazing, and the energy was electric. Thanks, Riley. I couldn't have done it without your support, Morgan replied, still trying to absorb everything that had happened. I really appreciate you stepping in when Casey tried to disrupt things. Anytime, Riley said, slapping Morgan on the back. You stood your ground, and that's what matters. You've set an example for everyone here. They see you, and they see hope. As they chatted, Morgan noticed a group of artists gathering nearby, animatedly discussing their experiences from the festival. He felt a swell of pride, knowing that he had created a space for their voices to be heard. It was a stark contrast to the hostility he had faced just weeks ago. But as the excitement of the day began to settle, Morgan's mind turned back to Casey. The shopkeeper had not remained silent for long, and Morgan knew he would likely retaliate. He had to be prepared for whatever came next. That night, Morgan lay awake, staring at the ceiling. His mind raced with possibilities. What if Casey tried to sabotage his store or spread more lies? He couldn't let fear dictate his actions. He had built something meaningful, and he was determined to protect it. The next morning, Morgan woke up early, ready to face the day. He knew he had to take proactive steps to ensure the success of his store and the community he had come to love. He decided to reach out to the local media, sharing the success of the festival and inviting them to cover future events at his store. This way, he could maintain momentum and keep the community engaged. With a clear plan in mind, Morgan drafted a press release highlighting the festival's achievements and outlining his vision for ongoing community engagement. He emphasized the importance of inclusivity and creativity, framing his store as a safe haven for all artists. After sending it out, he felt a sense of purpose settle over him. Later that week, a local news outlet reached out for an interview. Avery Kim was on the other end, excited to discuss the recent festival and Morgan's plans for the future. This is a great opportunity for you to solidify your presence in the community, she said. Let's show Casey that your store is here to stay. As they spoke, Morgan shared his vision for upcoming workshops, art classes, and community events. Avery listened intently, nodding along as he outlined his goals. I want to create a space where people can collaborate, learn, and express themselves freely. It's not just about selling supplies, it's about building a community. That's exactly the message we need to get out there, Avery replied. Your story is inspiring, and I think it will resonate with a lot of people. With the interview completed, Morgan felt a wave of excitement wash over him. The story would showcase his commitment to the community and counter any negative narratives that Casey might attempt to perpetuate. It was a step forward, and he was ready to embrace the journey ahead. Days turned into weeks, and Morgan's store flourished. He hosted workshops featuring local artists, collaborated on community projects, and created a newsletter to keep everyone informed of upcoming events. Attendance grew, and the sense of camaraderie deepened. People began to see his store not just as a business, but as a vital part of the community fabric. However, Casey remained a looming presence. Rumors circulated that he was planning something big, a last-ditch effort to undermine Morgan's success. Morgan felt the pressure mounting, but he refused to let it deter him. He had come too far to back down now. Then one afternoon, as Morgan was organizing supplies, the bell above the door jingled. He looked up to find Casey standing in the entrance, flanked by a few disgruntled customers. The shopkeeper's face was twisted in anger, and Morgan felt his heart race. "What do you want, Casey?" Morgan asked, forcing himself to remain calm. The tension in the room was palpable, and he could feel the eyes of his customers on him. "I want to talk," Casey said, his voice low and menacing. "You think you can just waltz in here and take over? This is my neighborhood." Morgan stood his ground. "This isn't about taking over, Casey. It's about building something positive for everyone. You could be part of that if you chose to open your mind." Casey laughed bitterly. "Open my mind? To what? A bunch of wannabe artists who think they can change the world? You're delusional." The customers around Morgan began to murmur, their expressions a mix of disbelief and concern. Morgan took a deep breath, knowing he had to defuse the situation. "This isn't the way to handle things, Casey. You're only driving people apart. We need to come together, not tear each other down." Casey's expression darkened, and he leaned closer, lowering his voice. "You think you're some kind of hero? You're nothing but a fraud, and I'll make sure everyone knows it." Morgan felt a surge of anger, but he refused to let it overwhelm him. "You can try, but the community is stronger than your hatred. People are coming together to support each other, and I won't let you destroy that." Just then, Riley entered the store, his presence commanding attention. "What's going on here?" he asked, immediately assessing the tension. "Just a little chat," Casey replied, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "I'm reminding Morgan that he's not welcome here." Riley stepped forward, his expression serious. "You need to leave, Casey. This behavior isn't acceptable, and it's time for you to realize that the community is moving forward without you." Morgan felt a rush of gratitude for Riley's support. "Thank you, Riley. This isn't just about me, it's about everyone who believes in this community." Casey's face twisted in frustration as he realized he was losing ground. "You'll see, Morgan. This isn't over. I'll make sure you regret this." With that, he turned and stormed out, leaving behind a swirling atmosphere of anger and disbelief. Morgan exhaled slowly, feeling the tension dissipate. The customers around him began to express their support, voicing their commitment to the community and their disdain for Casey's behavior. "I'm with you, Morgan," one customer said. "We believe in what you're doing." "Yeah, we're tired of the negativity," another added. "Let's keep moving forward." Morgan felt a surge of hope as he listened to their words. The community was rallying behind him, and he realized that Casey's attempts to undermine him would only strengthen their resolve. In the weeks that followed, the momentum continued to build. The news article about the festival had gained traction, and Morgan's store became a focal point for community gatherings. He hosted an open mic night where artists could showcase their talents, and the turnout exceeded all expectations. Each event drew in more people, and Morgan felt the atmosphere shift. The community was embracing creativity and collaboration, and the sense of unity was palpable. As he looked around at the smiling faces, he couldn't help but feel a deep sense of pride. But one evening, as he was closing up the store, Morgan received an unexpected phone call. It was Avery, her tone serious. "Morgan, I need to talk to you about something important." "What's going on?" he asked, concern creeping in. "I've been investigating some claims about Casey," Avery replied. "It turns out he's been involved in some Shady business practices. I think it's time to expose him. Morgan's heart raced. What do you mean? There are reports of him trying to sabotage new businesses in the area, and I've spoken to several people who have had similar experiences, Avery explained. This could be your chance to not only clear your name but also hold him accountable for his actions. Morgan felt a mix of emotions, anger, determination, and a bit of fear. He had faced Casey's hostility head-on, but now it seemed the situation was escalating to a new level. What do I need to do? Let's set up an interview where we can discuss everything. We'll uncover the truth about Casey and show the community that you're the one fighting for them, Avery said, her voice filled with conviction. The interview took place a few days later, and Morgan felt a surge of adrenaline as he sat across from Avery, ready to share his side of the story. He spoke candidly about his experiences, the challenges he faced, and the importance of community in overcoming adversity. As the interview concluded, Morgan felt a sense of liberation. He had reclaimed his narrative and was ready to stand up against Casey's attempts to undermine him. The article that followed was powerful, shedding light on the community's resilience and the changes Morgan was fostering. In the weeks that followed, Casey's reputation began to crumble. The community rallied behind Morgan, and Casey found himself increasingly isolated. As the community continued to unite around Morgan's vision, Casey Brooks faded into the background, his negative influence replaced by a collective spirit of creativity and support. Morgan had not only built a successful store, but also forged lasting connections that transformed the neighborhood. He was proud to be part of a community that celebrated diversity and resilience, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. You've made it to the end. If you enjoyed this story, I am confident that you'll love the next one appearing on the screen now. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and please give this video a like. I'll see you in the next one.